Hello, everybody, and welcome to World Talks, where every word matters. My name is Don Arleth. The new European Commission has been elected by the European Parliament. The proposed team obtained 370 votes in favor, 262 against, and 36 abstentions from lawmakers in Strasbourg. The issues von der Leyen will have to deal with next year include Donald Trump's return to the White House as U.S. president, along with mounting tensions with China, the war in Ukraine, and climate change. And now joining me to discuss what we can expect from the von der Leyen II Commission is Alberto Alemanno, professor of EU law and policy at HEC Paris. Hello, good evening, and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, everyone.
Now, I'd like to start off by asking you, this just went through today, how strong do you think the mandate is for the new commission, given the fact that a narrower margin voted for the new commission than voted in favor of re-electing von der Leyen earlier this year?
This is not a strong mandate. It's actually the first time that a new European Commission receives such a very minimal number of votes to confirm it into office. And this is due to the fact that the incoming commission has been playing a dual game. On the one hand, it has been reassured the mainstream political parties like the Socialist and Democrat and the Liberals that it would be business as usual, while on the other hand, already looking towards the right of the European Popular Party with European Conservative by Giorgia Meloni and Law and Justice in Poland. And therefore, this has created some uncertainty to the point that every single political group in the parliament was split, some of them supporting, whereas some others voting against or even abstaining on the new von der Leyen Commission.
Now, what kinds of proposals do you think we can expect from the Commission to help European companies reach the 2050 carbon neutrality goal? I know that'll be a tall order.
This commission has been quite ambiguous on its green ambitions. We all know that the von der Leyen major legacy, the Green Deal, has been interrupted approximately 6 months ago when the farmers really occupied the streets in Brussels. And since then, we have been seeing a lot of indications showing how ready she is in moving away from those goals, from those constraints, by diluting existing regulation, being the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive or being the deforestation law. So we cannot really expect much to be done in furthering these ambitions. And the question will be how much of this legacy will be preserved, how much implementation of those regulations will occur in a very geopolitically shattered world in which the Union tried to be competitive against America, against China, while at the same time imposing very high compliance costs for its own industry. So it's a very difficult spot to be in at the moment.
Do you think that there's some room for adjustment? I mean, probably in the next 100 days when Ursula von der Leyen announces some of her proposals, do you think she's willing to budge on some of these issues that are within the Green Deal?
I expect the European Union to become very transactional and to somehow replicate some of the political dynamics we are seeing playing on the other side of the Atlantic, seeing von der Leyen making and satisfying some of the business community desire for delays in the implementation of the rules, where at the same time also keeping mainstream parties, notably the Socialists and perhaps even the Greens, in the continuation. It will be a case-by-case analysis. Sometimes she will be looking towards the center-left, sometimes she will be looking towards the center-right, depending whether the issue is about animal welfare, competitiveness, or electric vehicles. So all of this will be really, really volatile. It won't necessarily pursue a clearly defined set of political priorities as we had in the past decades and as we had in the past 5 years, but rather a more ad hoc basis that will create a lot of uncertainty, both the business community and the political environment.
Now, how about the Draghi report? How will this impact some of these goals? Will some of the recommendations to make a European economy keep up with China and the United States be adopted?
Well, the Draghi report clearly provides a pretty crude assessment of the state of the European economy when measured against America and China, and is somehow nudging the new EU to chase both big countries in the world by turning it into a superpower. Personally, I don't think this is the right game for Europe. I think Europe is very strong in what it does, which is to strengthen its social market economy by trying to keep and redistribute wealth across different regions of Europe. And it might be very risky to actually get into the Draghi recipe without having a democratic support, which the current Commission really doesn't have. So in a way, we cannot integrate further economically and financially without having a democratic integration which is able to catch up for those ambitions. So there's a gap between the stated goals and the ability and the means the union is giving itself in a moment in which intergovernmentalism is priming over supranationalism.
Another big issue is European defense, the issue that Europe will have to address for sure, definitely over these next 5 years. Von der Leyen has said that we have no time to waste and we must be as ambitious as the threats are serious, adding that there was something wrong that Moscow was spending up to 9% of its GDP on defense compared to the EU's 1.9%. A question, can the European Commission address this issue and how likely is it to do so?
Certainly, the goal of this new Commission is to start a European-wide industrial policy that will potentially cut the application cost when it comes to making sure the European Union has its own industrial base. But obviously, this is going to take time. So I think it will be, again, an ad hoc situation. We're going to be seeing with perhaps the European Union buying armaments from the US in order to keep President Trump happy and to secure or renew its security guarantees through NATO, while at the same time allowing the European Union to gain time and to actually become much more independent and autonomous when it comes to defense spending, which in any event has been growing phenomenally since 2016 when the first Trump administration came into office, but is still not good enough given the nature of the challenge, which is really facing the territorial integrity of the European Union for the first time in history.
Right, and do you think what von der Leyen said earlier about taking more natural gas from the United States and essentially trying to replace what they take from Russia in terms of LNG imports, will that woo incoming President Donald Trump?
This is the sense of direction. We all sense that the EU and this new European Union will follow the Trump transactional approach to politics, and this will be inevitably further decoupling the relationship between the EU and Russia on the remaining gas import, which remains significant for certain countries of the European Union. But we have to remember that energy policy is an area in which each European country remains autonomous to define its own energy mix. So the EU can do as much as it can, as much as the other countries they allow it to do. And it's important to highlight that not all European countries are so anti-Russian in this particular moment. There are Trojan horses. There are countries and governments who are actually quite happy about having not only Mr. Trump return to the White House, but also having Mr. Putin getting further power. And defense is certainly an areas in which Russia is going to thrive much more than the European Union.
Well, yes, and that's exactly why I asked about Ms. von der Leyen's comments, because it does seem up to the individual member states to do what they want in terms of their energy system. Why do you think she would make such a comment? Do you think that was maybe to stick up for her own home country, Germany?
Well, that's a possibility. But if you look at COVID, the European Union has been doing so much on behalf of the member states when it comes to joint procurement of vaccines and even distribution of those vaccines. Possibly something similar is going to happen when it comes to energy. Despite the limited competencies and the limited structures and fragmentation of the energy policy market, I think under pressure, the union and the governments might be willing to cede more sovereignty to the European Union, and hopefully this Commission is going to be able to lead the way. And obviously, each country has its own economic interest. This is clear for Germany, but it's certainly clear for France and the nuclear champion and many other countries, which are currently situating the national interest and see where to actually land, which are the possible coalitions. But certainly, defense and energy will be the two major policy areas against which the success of this new Commission will be judged in history.
Defense and energy. Interesting. Well, then here comes Ukraine. Of course, von der Leyen saying that they need to support Ukraine as much as possible. Can the EU fill the gap if one arises when President Trump is sworn in as president?
Well, this remains a $6 million question. We don't really know whether the European leaders will have to be confronted to a moment in which the NATO guarantees they kind of disappear and they have to find their own ways and to mutualize their defense capabilities and to even mobilize their own forces. This is clearly a moment no European leader want to see and face. There's a lot of, I would say, complacency around these issues, but clearly this will be the question of the day, and it's going to be pushing many European countries, notably Poland, who has been taking the baton from the Franco-German engine in trying to bring together some governments and see what kind of solutions they can provide to the situation, while some other countries currently in the minority, but we can clearly include Slovakia or the Czech Republic, and certainly possibly the Netherlands, and potentially in the future France, who might actually be not so keen to be involved. So again, Europe is not set to speak with one voice when it comes to defending Ukraine. It has been the case so far, but this might not last for long, and that's why the prospect of a possible negotiation, a negotiated deal with Ukraine is something that might actually encounter the political support of many more European leaders than many people might expect today.
Concerning energy and defense, this whole idea of joint procurement, is that the answer? Is that the solution that perhaps Europe needs to pool its resources and achieve, I guess, more progress on these big issues together?
The European Union, contrary to conventional wisdom, is one of the largest spender in defense, but it's not doing it as European Union. It's every single member state spending a lot of resources, creating a lot of applications, and not necessarily creating capacity or deterrence per se. So obviously the only way to matter in this geopolitically shattered world is to actually pull together what you have and to have a more strategic approach to what you buy, how do you mobilize it, how do you organize it. And that's what the European recipe is all about. Initially, it was about coal and steel back in the 50s, and now it should actually be about armaments. And unless the European Union will be able to actually overcome such a test, its own credibility on the international markets, on the international stage, will be limited, and also vis-a-vis European citizens. This is an area where the European Union is set to deliver, and hopefully under the helm of Ursula von der Leyen, the member states will accept to actually make a quantum leap and be able to come together and overcome their historical reticence to actually come together in the defense space.
How much of an appetite does Europe have at this point, especially after the European elections earlier this summer, where we've seen this shift to the right, for there to be proposals for further European integration? Because it sounds like in defense, potentially in the energy policy, those would be welcome solutions, but they seem to be really bad words if you look at some of these more further right parties.
There's very little appetite for rethinking the European overall institutional architecture and potentially creating a decision-making process that is faster, that is basically implying further cessions of sovereignty to the European Union. I rather see the European Union coming together and making some further development through intergovernmentalism. That basically means countries agreeing, or some countries agreeing outside of the European Union, as they've been doing during the financial crisis with the European Stability Mechanism, in order to address some of the emergencies. And these mandates might actually then be institutionalized. This is the story of Schengen. This is the story of so many progresses the European Union made outside of the European Union, but then progressively internalized, communitarized, and then becoming mainstream and being part of what the European Union is about. We all remember this very famous line by one of European founding fathers, Jean Monnet, who said, well, Europe is made through crisis, and unless the EU doesn't face crisis, there won't be political momentum for European leaders to give up on their sovereignty. And I think we are again ahead of one of these historical moments in which history will dictate European leaders what they should do, because they don't really have much of an alternative. And this is going to be something they need to deliver for their own constituencies at the local and national level, even before then at the European one.
Well, maybe this is a new time for new opportunities. Alberto Alemanno, professor of EU law and policy at HCC Paris. Thank you, sir, very much for joining us. I appreciate your insight. And that's all the time we have here on this edition of World Talks. Thank you for joining us, and stay with us for more here on TVP World.